Hello everybody and welcome to this video looking at the new Airfix de Havilland Mosquito TT.35, and it was pretty apparent from the poll that I put on the channel that the TT version would win, but a close second was the third scheme, which is the Bomber Mark 16, so I've bought a second one, which is actually the older one, the Bomber Mark 16 version you can see there, and I've decided to do both. To see what you get in the box, there is a dedicated unboxing video, which has already been published. This video will focus on the building, and because I'm building both the old and the newer versions, there's going to be a slight change in how I normally make videos that I just want to mention. I generally show you the footage in chronological order, whereas here a little bit may seem out of place because I'm focusing on the Target Tug version first and then the Bomber version second. So occasionally you might see something which I haven't done yet, if that makes sense. But without further rambling, let's go on and see what happened when I built these kits. The tooling originally dates to 2021, which was the original Bomber Mark 16 version, and in 2025 Airfix have released a new sprue in here to do the Bomber 35 and TT.35. There are 182 parts, 3 schemes, and a recommended retail price of $24.99, as this is an Airfix Series 4 kit. There is an affiliate link in the description below if you want to buy one for yourself and haven't already, so that would help me out if you chose to press that. Construction, as tradition dictates, begins with the interior, which is comprised of this main piece here, which has the wing spars on it. They're the bits you can see sticking out. There is a bulkhead for the bomb bay on either side, which is what I have just glued in, so you see that they face down. This is me test fitting to make sure that they dry pointing at the correct angle and are not poking out or going to cause any problems later on. The bulk of the interior then goes on the other side, which forms the cockpit area, the rear of which is denoted by this particular little bulkhead here. All of these are clearly labelled and nice and easy to glue in because the holes are slightly different shapes and or sizes. We do also have the transmitter and receiver that go on in this area, as well as the headrest for the second man. I'm saying second man because obviously their role depends on this specific mark of Mosquito, and the seat for them as well, which is basically just a cushion on a plank. Whilst I expect there were some slight differences on the interior between a Bomber version and a Target Tug version, there is no variation in this particular kit. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure any changes are very minor. The main pilot seat is comprised of these 2 arms. They're at slightly different heights, and this arm here has this horrible ejection residue which just gets in the way and you have to sand down. There is a little, what I assume is bomb aiming thing in the bombardier's position up front here, and the rudder pedals are glued behind the main instrument panel. And don't forget, of course, there is this little tail wheel mount. This is important because this is how the tail wheel is fixed later on, to go in as well. Unlike the special hobby Mosquito that I made recently, you can actually assemble the entire interior nice and easily. You don't have to leave bits of it off to make sure it lines later on. The pilot seat will go in later. I'm also doing the engine nacelles at this point. We have a bulkhead fore and aft, which I'm gluing onto one side. These will line up more or less like this, and I'm just going to let them dry like this. I'm not going to glue them together yet, but I'm going to let them dry so that they are definitely in place. I'm using these Mr. Hobby markers. I very rarely use markers, and these are, well, I've bought them a little while ago, but they're the ones I first bought. They're sitting in my drawer. They're very good. They're just metallic colours. This just makes it a little bit easier than having to get out a paintbrush and wash that, especially when it is such a small thing that I'm covering. In this case, the interior of the wing, just inside of the landing light or identification light or marker light or whatever this light is on the underside of the wing. This is on both wings. Don't forget to glue that clear part in, otherwise, well, you'll forget and you'll have a hole. We now move on to the spindliest and most awkward bit of any Mosquito construction, which is the undercarriage, but this is my favourite way of doing it, even better than the 1/48 Tamiya one that I made previously. On one leg, which is the inside bound of each side, we have this extra support strut, either a support strut or a pneumatic arm or something, I don't know. It's an extra bit you have to stick on one side. You use the inside of the wing, or in what will be the inside of the nacelle, the bottom piece of the wing, as a jig, and it tells you do not glue this, and you just make sure that it's pushed tight. You can then glue everything together and it will all be beautifully in line. And once you glue on this mud guard, you pretty much have a solid base, a solid leg for it to go on. You've also got exhausts, which are in 2 pieces, which is a bit fiddly, but this is where they go, and you've got arrows up and forward, so it tells you exactly which way to put them in, so you can't mess it up without making serious issues. But they are a little bit fiddly, but I certainly appreciate having that. Quickly jumping to the bomber version, on the new sprue we have this lower bulkhead, which is at the rear of the bomb bay. And I can't actually work out what the difference is. I'm sure there is a difference. They seem to be the same size. They seem to have more or less the same pattern, but it does tell you to put this one in instead of the other one. So that is why I've got dark plastic on the light plastic. Attacker interior grey-green comes out for, well, the interior. This is a paint that I use for pretty much everything RAF because to me the colour looks about right. Just thin it down, chuck it in the airbrush, and if you can't be bothered then just slap it on with a paintbrush. The blue line stuff is great like that. But the green is being sprayed in slightly different locations to what is described in the instructions because obviously the interior is being grey-green, but the instructions tell you to paint the entirety of the engine nacelle and wheel bay area green, which I don't think is correct. I mean, I don't really have a way of guaranteeing it, but Special Hobby tell you to paint this bit green and the rest of it silver, so that's what I've done. Dark green, in this case it's an RLM colour, but it's just any olive green or any dark green for the fabric inside, which includes the wrap around the control column, the seats and the armrests on the pilot's seat as well. We do have an interior decal, just one, and it goes, funnily enough, on the instrument panel, hence why it looks like an instrument panel. If you'd rather paint it yourself, there is some raised detail on the part, but I put the decal on. And obviously you can see that I've painted some black as well, so I can now stick in the other components, which is the control column itself and the pilot seat. I kept them separate because it makes it a little bit easier to do the instrument panel with them off. Obviously, that's not a hard and fast rule, you can do it as you like. Contrast paint from Citadel Colours, the Basilisk Zanus Grey as I like to call it, is liberally applied as a wash. It's already quite thin, but I like to just put some extra water in and brush it around, wipe off any excess, and it just adds that little bit of texture and tones down an otherwise quite bright interior. We are then pretty much done with the interiors and they can be carefully glued in to one side. And once happy that everything is lined up neatly and is not going to fall out all over the place, you can glue on the other fuselage half. And don't forget, you have to have glued in that tail wheel mount as well. I'm not saying it because I forgot, I'm just saying it because I nearly forgot. That is then clamped whilst we work on other bits of the aircraft. There's a little window that goes down on the bombardier's position, so that goes in, and the tail assembly, which is separate tops and bottoms, and you can see there that it's stepped. It's got a joint so that you can't get them the wrong way around. The bomb bay is one area that was incorrect on the initial release. What you see on the right for Scheme B is what was included for the bomber versions included in the previous release, which is over here, and you just hack that in half. Well, you don't hack it in half. They supply bomb bay doors, I'm using inverted commas, which is just that piece hacked in half for bomb bay doors, but that's not actually what they looked like. The bomber version on the left in the pale grey plastic I'm doing with the bomb bay doors open, so I've glued in and painted the fuel tanks, and the rest of it will pop in shortly. These are the bomb bay doors that I mentioned in inverted commas that are not, and this is what they should look like, nice and sexy and smooth, because there's one thing about a Mosquito that is very well known, and that is it is very smooth. Having jaggedy bits poking out are not very good. The, if you like, end of the airflow section for this Mosquito is a smooth bulge, and again, this is the difference. The Target Tug version represents the kit as originally released, but is correct for Target Tug only, and the pale grey one is the bomber one. Engine nacelles can be glued together, and there is a pin that holds the propeller blades in. If you are very careful with your glue, that can be made to turn. And we have slightly different intakes. These were included on the original release, so clearly they expected to do this, But for the Target Tug one, you've got what appear to be extra vents. It's not an intake, is it? It's a coolant thing. Anyway, you've got extra vents on the side that are moulded in, and for the Bomber version, you don't have that. Clearly, there was a plan to release a later version from the tooling because it's part of the original release in 2021. Either way, once all of this is done, the engine nacelles can be glued in. We have another part with arrows. This is the radiator intakes inboard of the engines. Again, arrow points up and along, so you just slide it in as instructed. And for the Bomber version, we have these wing tanks. I kept calling them drop tanks. They're strictly speaking not drop tanks, are they? They're just external fuel tanks. But they are glued in on the Bomber version only, provided you've been sensible enough to drill the holes out. Scheme C includes the Cookie Bomb, which is another part of the new tool sprue. This is a big £4,000 bomb, and the reason why this version of the Mosquito has a big bulge on the bottom is to fit in the big bad boy itself. So I'm making that. We're also gluing together the propeller for the winch, which tows the target for the Target Tug version. Basically anything that's on the new sprue I thought I would use. And I'm actually going to keep this Target Tug bit on the sprue itself for painting later, so I'm gluing it all on and leaving it there, so I don't have to worry about clamping it or anything, just leaving it on the sprue. It's fine. The gate is at the bottom, which faces the plane anyway. More evidence of brilliant design work are these wing tips that have P and S written on them. I assume the P stands for potato and the S stands for Swede. I don't know. You've also got these masks that go in so that you can, if you're doing with the wheels down anyway, you can paint the aircraft without harming all of the stuff you have done inside. Just lovely bit of thought. Painting next, and focusing on the Target Tug one, I'm using Insignia White over some Tamiya Fine Grey primer. That's because I don't have any white primer at the moment, so I'm priming in grey and then putting white underneath the bits that will be yellow. The things that will be silver are going to stay grey. And due to the complexity of the masking, I'm making sure that this is done disassembled. So I'm going to have the tail separate, the wings off, and the fuselage all as modular bits. And the yellow comes out, which is Vallejo's RLM 04, which is also suitable for RAF trainer yellow. I like this yellow. It's a bit orangey, a bit dull. It doesn't look too bright. It looks, to me, what a trainer yellow should look like. And yes, I am aware that using a pink primer is supposedly the best thing that you can use for a yellow finish, but I'm happy with my previous kits that have used white. I will experiment at some stage with different primers, but this is a kit that I would rather use my trusted techniques on rather than experimenting. Airfix have thoughtfully said that the width of the stripes is 14 point whatever millimeters, so I'm using this little jigger I created. It's basically just a steel rule. I've got the tape straight at where it should be, and then once I'd got one angle correct, you can more or less get the others correct. But I really hate masking, and you can see here that the black goes around the registration, so I've added in a few bits of tape that I've compromised slightly. It's not quite right, but in theory it gets the general idea across. This took the longest part of building this, and here is the very stripy taped result. Rather less thoughtfully though, Airfix have made a mistake in the instructions, because if you follow the black at the very, very tail, you'll see that the tail wheel is covered in a black area on one side and a yellow area on the other side, so it's not correct. I do have some pictures of the aircraft that I took myself, but I couldn't find one which clearly showed that bit, so I just guessed. I went for whatever worked best before taking the plunge and painting black over the stripy bits, black over the yellow. And yes, I am aware that had I painted a coat of yellow over it, you're more likely to protect the colour to prevent running. However, just by making sure your paint isn't too thin, you don't spray it too close, and you don't allow it to pool, you get the same effect. Riskier, but I hate spraying yellow, so I just went straight for it and trusted that this technique worked, and with great anticipation peeled off the tape to see that, yeah, I think I'd pretty much nailed it. I'm very happy with that. Even though I've still got the silver to do, I do like to test things and see what it looks like, so I couldn't help but assemble the wings and the tail onto the fuselage just to see what they look like. Yeah, there's a couple that are a little bit wonky, but overall, I'm happy with it. It is, after all, the underneath of the plane, so you're not likely to see it properly anyway. Next, we had more masking and some silver paint, in this case the Hataka Silver Metallic. which is thinned with this Hatakka Paint acrylic thinner, and I'm putting this through my Fender airbrush rather than the gallery that I use most of the time. This is because I don't trust metallic paints in airbrushes. Last time I used my gallery with metallic paint, it took me a week to get rid of all the metallic bits out of it. Took a very thorough clean. It wasted a lot of my life. I just thought if I use this one, firstly it's got a wide nozzle so I can just blitz it, and secondly it doesn't matter, I can just go straight to the gallery one, even if this does have some metallic residue in it for now. Once all of that is done, the plane can be assembled for real this time. Oh, and in case anyone does feel like mentioning it, I would recommend you don't. No, I'm not undercoating the plane in gloss black before spraying on the silver, because that would make it look metallic and natural and metal. The Mosquito was made of wood. The silver effect was achieved by getting some silver paint and slapping it on. If you look at the real things, they don't look overly metallic. They just look like a kind of silvery grey. The other difference with the Target Tug version are these little struts that were bolted on or glued on or whatever to the tail surface. On the real aircraft, this would form a protective ring, essentially, to make sure that the target it was tugging, there we go, didn't catch on anything important. It was free from all of the control surfaces. There'd be a little wire around there, not included. But we're going to move over to the bomber version for now, which I've primed in black, and we now have the Vallejo medium sea grey to go on all of the lower surfaces. I didn't feel the need to paint this one in components because there are no awkward divides that I'm going to have to tape around. The entire engine nacelle, for example, will be grey on the side and then top colours on top, etc, etc, so much easier. I've then got the Model Air Ocean Grey, which is a new purchase I've forgotten I had, actually. I should have used that for the last aircraft I built that needed Ocean Grey. But I'm doing a hard divide for the bottom and top colours, and then just going over everything with the Ocean Grey. The third colour in this camo scheme will be no surprise. It is, of course, the Model Air Dark Green, which is RAF Dark Green, standard for pretty much any RAF camouflage you're going to be doing from this time period. I chose not to mask this and go for a softer camo. Not really sure why. It probably would look better as a hard camo, but you get enough fidelity with this airbrush, although again it was actually slightly dirty and did spit in a few places, so I had to go over the grey. But anyway, generally speaking, because it's got a small needle, I think I just prefer the soft camo look, and with all the masking I did on the Target Tug version, it was just nicer to not have to bother. The cookie bomb that is going to go inside was also painted this colour, this dark green. The only slight variation is that this is going straight onto a pale grey primer as opposed to going on the ocean grey that the rest is, but I don't mind if there's a bit of colour variation. After all, bombs tend not to fade in their colour as much, being a one-use weapon as they are. The decals, obviously I've got two decal sheets, one for each of the kits. Interesting to note that whilst they both have stencil details, the numbers are all completely different. So I was using the stencils from the old aircraft, just cross-referencing with the new kit to make sure that they went in place on the bomber version. Obviously not a problem with this version here. Also, both aircraft have been blitzed with some gloss varnish to make sure that it is nice and smooth and easy to move the decals around. In the past, I've had silvering on Mosquitoes with these ones here over the fuel tanks. Thankfully, I did not get any in this case. It's probably more a me thing because they were cartographed last time and they're cartographed this time. I glossed it last time, I've glossed it this time, but I'm no longer getting silvering. So obviously something about my technique is just better. I can't really explain it. The bit that I mentioned down here with the registration being essentially in a yellow box with some black, I have moved the 719, which you can see on the left hand side here. I've moved that over a little bit so that I didn't have to paint into the yellow. I know it's not entirely accurate, and the angle was just eyeballed for the A here. It should be in line, and it's a tiny bit out. I know, not 100% accurate, but it made it so much easier when putting the decals on. As for the bomber version, the Mosquito has this structural support on the starboard side of the fuselage, and you always end up having to put registration over it. It is always a faff, and decal solution was on standby, but I'm pleased to report there were no casualties, and no decal solution was even needed. Thankfully, the cartograph decals included in these kits are fantastic, and that's true of both of them as well. Both kits had equally as good decals. And also to prove that I'm not always entirely lazy, I am putting the decals on the cookie bomb, which says a gift to Germany and Happy Xmas, Mr. Austrian Man. And this is going to be glued inside the bomb bay and not going to be visible in any way, shape or form. Speaking of which, there's a separate bracket for this because the kit comes with 4 500-pounders, I believe. And of course, the new kit comes with the big cookie, so you need a new bracket. Canopies are stuck on just with standard poly cement, just taking a risk because that's the way I like to live my life. We have these separate side pieces which seem to fit with absolutely no issues whatsoever, and the windows on the nose go in from the outside, so as long as you're careful with the glue there is no problem there. Although I probably would still recommend using a clear drying glue instead of poly cement, but hey ho. There's also a landing light on the Target Tug version. That was a clear piece on the Bomber version. And because I have had enough of masking for possibly the rest of my life, I'm not masking the canopy, hence why I'm gluing it on now. And I've painted everything in the undercoat colour of interior grey-green, hence why it is very useful to have a brush-ready paint. It's not too thin, and that acts as a base for the same brush-ready silver that I used for the rest of the aircraft. I know that it is a little bit scruffy, but by using a sharpened stick that I happen to have on my desk, you can scratch around any of the paint which has gone a little bit too far, just to tidy things up if necessary, although of course being neat is just better in the long run. The tail wheel now slides very nicely into the socket that you glued in right at the interior stage, and the main undercarriage has enough flex to be able to fold in without you having to glue it in before the nacelle goes on. This is the main difference to the Special Hobby kit where they tell you can't do this, but I did it anyway. It's also incredibly satisfying because you have to sort of slide it in to hook in at the aft end of the wing, and then you've got these 2 sockets which plug in for the fore end of the wing. And just as I was getting the tweezers to help it slide in, it just clicked, and it is so satisfying when you just get it right and it fits beautifully. Absolutely love it. The undercarriage doors are then glued in. These are a bit spindly, but they were painted on the sprue. They are silver, as I mentioned. And the wheel also painted separately. We have the hubs, which are glued in on either side of a single... No, it's not a single tyre piece, sorry. It's 2 halves of a tyre piece that I've already glued together and painted. These, as long as they are squeezed in, go in nicely, but remember they are weighted. So you've got a sag at the bottom to represent the weight of the plane touching the ground. So I tend to leave it until the very end, make sure the tail wheel is in, and then sit them down nicely. The propeller assemblies can then be glued on, although I assembled these off camera. More Mr. Hobby marker action. This time I'm going for burnt iron. I didn't do this on the Bomber version, just on the Target Tug version. We have 2 sizes because they're double-ended, and the fine size is perfect for doing exhausts. I don't know why I hadn't a thought of using this pen for previous exhausts, but hey, at least I've learnt it now. Overall, the end result I think is excellent. And I've also bought some AK pens. This one is yellow. This is specifically for the propeller blade tips because opacity in acrylic yellow paints is usually a little bit of an issue. This is the first time I have used this pen, so I didn't know what the colour would look like, didn't know how thick it would be, and I did end up brushing it against my fingers, but hey, it looks all good. The main Target Tug winch just glues on nicely, and then we have a bracket and a stick. I assume this is where the wire goes that runs from the winch to the target, and that just glues nicely on the back of this assembly here, and with that we are done. Firstly then, in this conclusion, I do just want to make it very clear that I am very happy that Airfix have retooled the bomb bay for the Bomber Mark 16 version. It was wrong on the previous one. There's a logical reason for it, which doesn't matter now because they've addressed it. I think it is very good for a manufacturer to address that there is an issue and to rectify it. Obviously that doesn't change the old ones, but as you've seen here, if you buy both, you can just retrofit the other one. In terms of the Target Tug, it's okay. There are a couple of things which aren't quite right. So there should be another guard in front of the tail wheel, according to photos. That's not included. And it does look a bit strange having those guards on the horizontal surfaces at the tail without the actual wire that goes around it. I don't think there is a way that they could have moulded that. Certainly not in plastic. It would look ridiculous. But it just seems a little bit odd then that they've done a target tug version when it's kind of missing something. The bomber version is the same kit that I loved in 2021 and I love now, except of course it has a nice smooth bomb bay area rather than that weird bulgy broken target tug bomb bay area. Doing it with the bomb bay doors open is just a bit of visual interest, and that's the sort of thing I like to see on a model. The more options, the better. On the topic of options, I would be wrong to not address something which really did annoy me about this and will continue to annoy me about it because, let's face it, they're never going to fix it. This kit includes one pilot figure, and I don't really understand the logic behind that. They've taken the trouble to design a pilot that fits inside the Mosquito, but only one. So if you're sending it on a bomber mission, one of the crews got bored halfway and decided just to go his own way and presumably jumped out. I don't know. There's not somebody lying down in the nose. There's not somebody sitting in the second seat. There is just a pilot. So presumably it's only accurate for a ferry flight or something like that. It seems odd that they've gone to the trouble of actually fitting a pilot when they usually don't include any, but why have they only got one on a 2-seat plane? Although, as you can see here, the pilots are ridiculously small. The fella in the middle is from a different Airfix kit, and the Mosquito has these absolutely minute pilots, so maybe their complete lack of size makes them useless anyway, hence why I didn't bother fitting them. Whereas the error which led to the original tooling being wrong for a bomber is entirely understandable, it was a design choice to only have one crew in a 2-crew plane, and it's not the first and it probably won't be the last Airfix kit that does this, so that is the only thing which really bugs me, even though I didn't fit them in. It just baffles me. However, the addition of the bomb, as you can see here, really does liven up the aircraft a bit. It just brings more variety to it. You can do it with normal load, with a cookie load, you can do it as a target tug. There's so much variety in this tooling now, it is fantastic. Unfortunately though, I've now glued the bomb inside the bomb bay where you can't see the effort that I put into it, but hey, that's only because I'm making a video on YouTube. I knew that I could show it off, and if I really want to see what it looks like, I can just watch my own footage back. Even though I have made some compromises with the positioning of the stripes around the registration of and the roundel of the target tug version, it definitely gets the impression across. It's visually quite interesting, and I do like that this has been added, even if the previous point about the lack of wire guard is taken into consideration. It is fun and enjoyable, with the exception of having to spend so much of my time with masking tape, scissors, knife, ruler, measuring, using my brain. I'm not here to use my brain, I'm here to just make planes. These were actually the third and fourth Mosquitoes that I've made from this tooling. The original was a Bomber Mark 16 from the original release in 2021 that I painted with enamel paints with a paintbrush. It's very thick, it's very ungainly, and unfortunately the varnish was too thick and it just looks like, well, it looks like crap. And it's going to go in the bin. This one replaces it. So this is a final farewell to this old Mosquito. I know some people don't like throwing kits out, but quite frankly, I've got too many and I need the space, and if it brings me no enjoyment seeing it on the shelf, it's going to go in the bin. But it has been nice to see my desk completely flooded with Mosquitoes, and it is very interesting to see my journey in the last 4 years in particular, because I have come a long way, and it is important to acknowledge that, even if I genuinely think the kits I used to build even 4 years ago are not fit for display anymore. I am very aware now that I've been rambling for nearly half an hour, so I should wrap this one up. Thank you for watching this far. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you're new here, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you liked the video, you can also hit like, and if you disliked it but you made it this far, well, excellent, treat yourself to hitting that dislike button. You can hit the notification bell. Don't know if it does anything, because half the time it doesn't work for me, but hey ho, might as well. You can even become a channel member like the people appearing on screen. These people tend to know what is on my workbench long before anyone else, well, except for me, because obviously I know because I'm there. But if you are interested in joining them, then you'd be very much appreciated. If not, just watching the video and preferably hitting the like is good enough for me. So thank you very much. I'm going to leave it at this one. I will see you hopefully again in another video. And if you're falling asleep to the sound of my voice, then brace yourself. I'm about to start talking again. Goodbye, everyone.